the Nigerian Senate on Tuesday called on the federal government to provide more industrial incentives and protections, such as offering concessionary loans and larger tax incentives for new entrants into the cement sector. The motion was sponsored by Kwara lawmaker Lola Ashiru and 5 other senators. The deliberation comes on the heels of scarcity and a hike in the price of cement across the country. Call was a sequel to the debate on the motion on the, quote, need to liberalize the cement policy in Nigeria. Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the NNPC, Mr. Mele Kyari, has frowned on the re-emergence of petrol queues in different parts of the country, assuring that the situation would normalize. Mr. Kyari gave the assurance when he addressed State House correspondents after giving an update on the petroleum sector to President Buhari at the presidential villa in Abuja. The Bureau of Statistics has released its March 2021 transport fare report. The Bureau reported an increase in bus fare, airfare, and a 102% increase in motorcycle transport, known as Okadas. Joining us to discuss this further is Damilola Akinbami, Head of Research at Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Damilola, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Rotus.
Kicking things off, I guess, on the Senate and the motion to try and liberalize the cement sector. What do you make of the move from the Senate?
I think, first of all, let's understand some concept definition. So liberalization. So in the context of trade, you're looking at either the removal or reduction of restrictions on restrictions on the free exchange of goods. Now, if you look at the cement industry in Nigeria, it's an oligopoly. By that, I mean that there are very few sellers. We just have 3 major players, while you have a significant number of buyers. And some of the characteristics of an oligopoly, high barriers to entry, it's highly capital intensive. The cement industry in Nigeria is highly capital intensive. And we have a price leader and you have price followers. So because of that high capital intensive nature of the industry, obviously that has deterred new entrants from coming into the industry. And I guess that's also the angle from which the Senate is coming in from, because obviously if you can improve the industry in terms of infrastructure, cement infrastructure required, creating an enabling environment, creating incentives, for instance, tax incentives, basically incentives that would attract more players into this market, and definitely what you would see is that there will be increased production because you have more players in the market. There will be increased supply, and that obviously will bring down the price of cement in the market. But obviously right now, like I mentioned, because it's highly capital intensive, that has deterred a lot of people from coming into the market. And right now, the price of cement, a bag of cement is selling for about 3,300 naira. And right now we're in the planting season, and we're in the rainy season more importantly. And during the rainy season, there's a decline in the demand for cement because people put a hold on all their construction and building activities. You hardly see people building or renovating during the rainy season. So because that demand for cement is expected to decline, that would obviously affect the prices. So in the next couple of months, at least while we're still in the rainy season, we might see the price of cement trickle down a little bit. But then still, we need more players in the market. And because of that, if we have more players, you see supply increase and will affect price positively. Thank
you for that. Just a quick follow-up on Nigeria has affordable housing goals.
Yes.
Hoping, we've got the estimates at 17 million units deficit. If cement prices continue to remain high, does that not impact the goals of the country in trying to get more affordable housing?
Yeah, so and that's why that supports the argument of why you need more players in the market. And because the demand is there, one from the government side, because we know the infrastructure goal and reform of the government. So we know that we're going to continue to see an increase in civil works construction. We saw a lot of that last year, despite the COVID lockdown. And we're going to continue to see more of that because Nigeria has a huge infrastructure gap in excess of $100 million per annum. So definitely that is there. And because demand is there and demand is going to continue to rise, although from that, I just talked about the public sector.
Right.
Private sector also, there's that demand. But right now, because of weak disposable income, so obviously we've seen that trickle down effect and we've seen a decline in the demand from the private sector. But as the economy recovers, we're going to start to see more demand for building estates and what have you. And look at the GDP numbers for Q4. The real estate sector actually recorded positive growth for the first time since the first quarter of 2019. So the demand is there, the market is there. So more importantly, we need to provide cement. We need to increase the production to meet that demand. Because as long as we have that supply deficit, the price is going to remain elevated. So that's the major issue.
Thank you so much for that. Let's move to fuel. The fuel queues are popping up in Abuja.
Yes.
Mele Kyari trying to calm the markets, as they say. What do you make of his comments, I guess, in his briefing to reporters after talking to the president?
Yeah, so from what he said, and we are aware that the petrol tankers drivers, they went on strike, and that, I guess, created that fear, and we're still seeing queues in Abuja, and what they are striking about is about compensation and what have you. And according to him, the NNPC has intervened, and the strike has been put on hold. It's been suspended for 1 week. But more importantly now, okay, fine, it's been suspended for 1 week. What happens after that week has ended? Are we going to see, is there going to be a resolution? Are the strikes going to come back in place or not? So that is what is creating uncertainty, and that is what is creating fear. And once there's uncertainty and there's fear, you obviously see panic buying, which would push up the price of petrol in the market.
Thank you for that. We just put up a quote from him where he was asked about deregulation. Yeah, there it is. I have no updates in hand now. This deregulation is beyond me, but we're engaging to make sure we have the right timeline. I mean, what do you make of the head of the state oil company saying that deregulation is beyond him when he's made it clear that it's, subsidy is too expensive and it needs to happen? What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, that kind of statement in Nigeria, I don't think it should come as a surprise to anyone anyway. And it just re-emphasizes the fact that the Nigerian downstream petroleum industry needs to be deregulated. We know, we've heard the government officials, both the federal government and NNPC, come out to say that paying for subsidy is not sustainable. And from reports that we're hearing right now, the subsidy is around, at least for the first couple of months, they paid about 500 billion naira because the NNPC pays about 100 to 120 billion per month. So, and if we know, he has also said that there's not going to be any price hike in May. So what does that mean after the end of May? Just like when we're talking about the strike and whatnot, at the end of May, are we going to should we expect an increase in petrol prices? So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think at least we need to even give them that positive applaud. At least they are communicating, because one major issue is communication. So right now we know that there is no need to panic, at least for the next 1 month. But then what happens after that? There has to be a long-term plan. And are you going to be able to negotiate with Labour? Because we know that there's been that ongoing negotiation and talks between Labour, the Nigerian Labour Congress, and the NNPC and the government to try and find a conclusive and amicable outcome for all parties involved. But what is that going to, how is that going to pan out? Because it is clear to everyone that it's unsustainable. We look at the government's fiscal position. We know that government revenue fell by about 12%, almost 13% in January. And we know that obviously they're thinking of visiting the Eurobond market to raise about $500 million from the Eurobond market. So definitely the government cannot keep paying subsidies. So something needs to be done. And even the landing cost has increased now to about 260 naira per litre. Meanwhile, the retail price is going for 162, 165. So come on, the math is clear to everyone. It's unsustainable. Subsidies have to go, but when? And you need to communicate that on time, because right now the average Nigerian is embattled, and we need to factor that in to their prices.
In fact, speaking of the average Nigerian being embattled, let's take a look at some of those fuel prices from the Bureau of Statistics report. I think we've got bus fare. Bus fare was up about 82%. If we can pull that up. Okay, this is bus fare. So 82% year-on-year increase for bus fare within Nigeria, within the cities. I think we also have air fare and motorcycle fare as well. Take a look at that. Yeah. Okay, so airfare didn't increase that much, and I guess not many people were flying because of the lockdown. So just an 18% rise year on year. But let's look at motorcycles. I like the fact that the Bureau of Statistics is still tracking this, despite in Lagos they said
there's a ban in certain parts of the state. Yes. 102%
increase. So what do you make? Speaking of in context within what you just said with the average Nigerian being battled, what do you make of the price increases you're seeing with the Bureau of Statistics report?
Well, the price increase was driven by obviously an increase in price of fuel. So if you look at, because that over 100% spike in the price of the motorcycles, it's year on year. And meanwhile, as in month on month was much lower. And that was because obviously we've seen between last year March and this year March, we've had about 2 or 3 price increases in petrol. So definitely that has affected it. And also last year there was a lockdown. the lockdown was implemented 30th of March, so effective April. So now we are beginning to see that return to normalcy. A lot of people are returning to work. There's movement. The restrictions are limited to an extent. So that demand also has contributed to the price increase. And it's just a very important factor because transport fares account for about 6% of the consumer basket. That seems marginal, but the impact, the spillover effect is way more than that 6%. Even people that don't even use petrol, once they hear that petrol prices have increased, everyone increases their prices.
Right.
If you even look at intra-city transport bus fares, they also increase about almost 80% year on year. So it's quite worrisome, and because that infrastructure is not there. And the thing is, yes, all prices, there's that cost, there's that benefit. When all prices increase, the benefit in terms of, because we depend on oil, we get our revenues, our external reserves, and what have you from there. So we stand to benefit from higher oil prices. But the cost there is that because we import refined fuel, if the price of oil increases, definitely we should expect to see an increase in petrol price because of the landing cost that would increase. And even right now, we are seeing that the landing cost has increased to about 216 naira per litre, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah. The exchange rate too has weakened. So these are some of the factors considered when calculating the landing cost. And as long as these factors continue to move against the average Nigerian, we're going to continue to see the petrol price increase. So the solution there is your refineries. We have 4 refineries that are not working. We know that the government has approved 1.5 billion naira to rehabilitate the Port Harcourt refinery, and we know that Dangote's refinery is coming up on stream. We need more of such so that we depend less on imported fuel, and that would definitely have an impact on our import bill. It would have an impact even on the petrol price. It would have an impact on inflation. Fantastic.
Now, Dami, if the government was to get their way with their deliberations with Labour, and we see, you've mentioned the landing cost where it is, and we see that increase. I mean, what's the impact? We're already talking about year-on-year prices for transportation increasing. There surely is an impact on our respective pockets if that was to happen.
Oh, definitely. Inflation is going to increase further. Right now, core inflation is above 12%, almost 13%. And core inflation is the headline inflation, less food inflation. And we also know that food inflation is close to 23%. And like I mentioned earlier, once petrol prices increase, practically almost everything increases. So it has inflationary implications. So, and that's not good for the average Nigerian, because I don't think anyone has experienced any salary increase. Even if your salary has increased in nominal terms, in real terms, because the exchange rate or the naira has weakened against the dollar, in real terms, your salary has actually declined. So definitely it's inflationary. And what we would see is that Nigerians will come up with various options. So maybe you start to carpool, or you reduce the number of trips, physical trips. So you rely more on remote virtual calls or what have you, or basically just reduce your expenditure on luxury items and spend that more on transport costs. So definitely we're going to see a shift in consumer patterns.
Great. Now, assuming that the big wigs in government are watching this right now, just about a minute and a half, why don't you talk about political will? Because there's some, whispers that the government is, because of where prices are now, they're afraid of making this move. And what do you make of that?
Political will is a very, very significant point, because for any decision, whether it's in terms of removing the subsidy or any policy reform, you have to have, especially if it has a significant negative impact on the consumer, you have to have that political will to bite the bullet and then just move on. Definitely, the negative implications are huge, but that's short term. Why not do that now? We've been talking about this fuel subsidy for years.
Yes,
for years. Come on. So if something had been done way back, we won't be talking about that now. So the government definitely needs to just bite that bullet and move on. Definitely, there are significant impact on or implications on the average Nigerian. Also, you could also improve on the infrastructure solutions. So, for instance, we know that there's been so much noise about railway, transportation, and what have you. That is there also. Rehabilitate your refineries, build new ones. I would prefer for them to actually build new ones, or even concession it out. Let's have more private sector players in the market, because the government doesn't have the funds to rehabilitate and do all these things. So let's have more of the private sector in this. And I guess that we would definitely see an improvement down the line. Yes.
Damilola Akinbami, Head of Research at Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Otis.